the key thing is to recognize, right? To learn to listen to your body. Somebody told me a long time ago that we are in a constant juggling act. And we have about 6 balls or 7 balls that we're juggling, but there's only one made out of glass. Everything that we think we can drop at work because we think, oh, if we drop this, we're going to get fired. All these things are not as important as that glass ball, which is your family.
Welcome back to the Executive Excel podcast, folks. I'm really excited and happy to have Walter Dusseldorp here from, calling from New York City. Is that correct?
New York metropolitan area right now, but the beautiful Adirondacks in upstate New York.
Oh, beautiful. Love the Adirondacks. Gorgeous there. He's also known as the Dutch Mentor. He's a dynamic voice in personal development and mentorship, known for empowering individuals to unlock their full potential. With deep experience in coaching and leadership and resilience, he blends real-life stories with practical strategies that inspire action. As the founder of the DutchMentor.com, he's built a global platform dedicated to growth, transformation, and mentorship. Whether guiding others through challenge or encouraging bold steps, he brings energy, insight, and a growth mindset to every conversation. So when he's not mentoring, this is interesting. I love this about you. You'll find him in the sky literally because he flies helicopters and airplanes, always exploring new perspectives. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tammy. A very kind introduction. I look forward to a great conversation today. And indeed, when you need to clear your head, there's no better way than go into the third dimension and go up into the clouds, as they say.
Oh, it's funny. I used to be so afraid of flying, and I'm not anymore. But there was a time when I just did not want to fly, and it was funny because I started to approach flying like I did when I was in the emergency room. And I used to tell my clients or my patients at the time, if the emergency nurse or the doctor looks calm and collected, you got nothing to worry about, even if it looks like chaos, right? And so I always refer myself to the pilots and the staff. If they look calm, collected, I got nothing to worry about. So that's sort of how I approach flying now.
That certainly holds true in all phases of life, by the way.
Yeah, I would say so. So what led you to become the Dutch Mentor? I love that name. So what made you realize that this is the kind of work you want to do? And what is it that you do exactly?
The long story short is I've experienced a full value stream of healthcare from a clinical provider as a paramedic and flight paramedic into working as a supervisor manager, then more on executive teams over the last 25, 30 years. But along the way, it became quite apparent to me that we have lots of wonderful, high-performing technical people, doctors, nurses, administrators, and it's really agnostic to the industry, who will get promoted into leadership roles, but they don't get the support from the team, their next person up the ladder, to really become highly effective leaders. And I call that many of them get trapped into the valley of despair. And I wanted to do something about that. So I had the opportunity to work closely with my mentor developer program in 2012, 13, 14, and had a very large team, over 2,000 people with all different disciplines. And we were able to try and test this out to see what kind of things we could work on that would help us get across that valley of despair. And it very much talks about making sure that we start at self-awareness, mental wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, relationship wellness, financial wellness. Those are the pillars that if they are shaky, it's very difficult to thrive on. And then it is, how can we provide them with support and guidance on a more consistent basis, not just once a month or a quarter, but consistently, so we can help them develop into the people that they want to be, the leaders that they desire to be. So that's really where it came from. The Dutch Mentor is funny because, of course, I was born in Holland, came to America when I was 18 years old. And when you start looking for a business catchy phrase like, what am I going to name myself? Another excellence coach or another performance coach or a mentor? I said, you know what? I'm proud to be Dutch. I'm very proud to be an American as well. I said, it's a great combination. Why don't we just call it the Dutch Mentor? And it has stuck ever since. So that's where it all came from.
I love that. You've said in some of the content that I've seen of yours, you say that people get what they deserve, not what they negotiate. Or sorry, they don't get what they deserve, they get what they negotiate. What do you mean by that? And how does that apply to the work that they should be doing or that you do?
I'll put it in simpler terms, is that people only reach the top of their dreams. Right. And too often people dream too small and limit themselves. And that's really what I try to get to with people. Is when I ask them, tell me a little bit about yourself. They're really good at telling me about the what and how, but not so much about the why. And once you start digging into the why, and then I ask them the question, say, what do you see? What is your big dream in 10 to 15 years from now, or the end stage of your career? And far too many people dream very, very small. Maybe one level up, maybe some people go 2 levels up, and you limit yourself. So the goal is really that if you want to be the very best person that you can be, whatever your dream is, not my dream, not your parents' dream, not your peers, but your dream, You have to negotiate that. You have to go put yourself out there. You need to go. Don't depend on others to give it to you, but you have to take the bull by the horn and go get what you need in a growth mindset.
Yeah, I think Mel Robbins uses this phrase a lot: is no one's coming to save you. So
Yep.
if you want something, you're going to have to figure out how to move it forward. So then so that kind of comes into the storylines around imposter syndrome is one I see a lot in clients, and some negative sort of self-beliefs around these goals. So then how does one sort of start to expand? So you say people think too small, they maybe dream too small, mainly because these negative thoughts come in, right? Oh, that's not really possible for me. I don't have the capacity. Who's going to believe me? Why would I step into this leadership role? I've struggled with burnout. I don't want to get burned out again. So how do we then move people out of that framing?
So again, it starts by getting to know yourself, but getting to know something about your brain. So I talk a lot about leading with the upper brain versus the lower brain, but there's even more importantly, there's a positive brain and there's a negative brain. And the negative brain is actually more powerful than the positive brain. So if you listen to your negative brain, because it loves negativity, oh, you're not good enough, you can't handle this, it's too much, I will never make that much money, it's too far to travel, that feeds the negativity. And your negative side feels great about that. So once you recognize the power of negativity and how it holds you back, and you learn to kind of push that aside by daily exercises, by promoting now the positive brain of what I can do, what I will accomplish, what I need to do, what actions do I need to take, how do I measure it, how do I set milestones, how do I get the help I need in order to be able to reach my fullest potential. And it really starts with a very simple exercise I give to every single one of my clients. First thing you do in the morning when you swing your feet off the bed and you pick up either your phone or pen and paper, doesn't make a difference, write down 5 things that you're grateful for. Because you want to train your brain right out of the gate that you need to be positive. And every time you have a negative thought, suppress it with something else, right? So you might have to do this multiple times during the day. Now, interesting enough, the military got this right. So I asked the question, why does a soldier have to make his bed first thing in the morning? Well, they do that very specifically to set the mindset to be successful and to never cut corners.
Right.
And if you start your day off right, you're more likely to get through your day doing the right things right.
Yeah, there's quite a few influencers and authors who speak about this as well, as the notion that and millionaires talk about this all the time, is that you really have to have those positive habits first thing in the morning. So whether it's looking to achieve wellness or looking to grow your career, it doesn't matter. I see, and I agree with you. This is something that that all of us tend to struggle with. It's really easy to go to that negative biased brain, if you will, because that's the survival mode, right? That's kind of the base level survival. But if we want to thrive, we have to flip the switch and go to more of that confirmation or positive biased brain, which is, I love that perspective. So then what do you think is the biggest challenge that your clients are facing in this time, in this era right now? What are some of the things you're seeing?
Well, I think it's really two things, right? It is that they set goals early in the year. Yeah. And when they don't reach their goals, they lower their threshold.
Yeah.
Because they want to feel happy about it, right?
Yep.
So if you ask the question to a boss, how successful is the team? They say they are 75% successful. And I say that's not true. They're 25% successful. How do you know? Because you, the boss, want to be successful to your boss. Therefore, you lower the threshold of success of your team so you can promote that. So that is really a falsehood that we keep telling ourselves.
Right.
So one way to overcome that is, and it's no different to the first, what we just spoke about, is that not only do we need to frame our mind in a positive mindset and feed that throughout the day as needed, but we need to learn to measure the things that we do, and we need to score that on a daily basis and hold ourselves accountable. So if I did something well, I give myself a green. The brain interprets green as dopamine. It gives you a little feel-good medicine. But if I came up short, listening to the little voice in the head, it's like, you did good, but not as good as you could have done. That is yellow. And if you didn't do it, it's red. And you have you train your brain that if you see more reds and yellows, you have to ask yourself the question, why is that? And take an appropriate countermeasure, including taking, on some sort of a consequence. Now, the consequence can be demeaning because then that feeds the negative brain again. But it needs to be meaningful enough that it gives you an incentive too. And that is where often people get stuck. They fall back on old habits. Right? If it is 6 months now, right? We're almost finishing up the second quarter of the year. I bet you that 90% of the people have not met, are nowhere near their goal set for what they had in mind for 2025. But if you ask them if they're satisfied with the team, 75 to 80% will say, we're hitting a home run. Right? And that's the reason why we often fall short in our projections. That's how we fall short in our personal accomplishments and goals. We need to change our habits and behaviors and be more accountable in order to fully reach our potential.
I love the phrase of the use of the word countermeasures. I mean, I come from emergency management, so that really resonated with me in terms of a word or phrasing, because countermeasures is really looking at those threats, the things that are going to get in your way, that are going to cause you to procrastinate, cause you to stop yourself, essentially, and looking at ways that you can counteract those. It almost feels like there's another exercise in there for someone who's listening, around listing out the things that get in your way, listing out the times that you struggle, and what countermeasure do you then apply to that risk narrative that you've just identified. It's just a really cool way of thinking about it.
It's funny you say that. I'm a certified emergency manager as well. So we get to the exercise, we do the action report, we identify problems, and then the sexiness of the process disappears. And again, there's crystal clear, people don't follow up, and then we do the exercise again, and the same things pop up over and over and over.
Yeah.
Right. And this happens in life all of the time. Events happen. We react to them. We have an outcome. We don't take it at the root cause. We don't take the countermeasures necessary to mitigate, to prevent, or to improve upon it. And we go back and we do the same thing over and over. It's a habit that people have that we need to break.
Yeah, it's lessons observed versus true lesson learned. Observing them and doing nothing about it doesn't help you the next time that emergency happens.
Correct.
It doesn't help you the next time you procrastinate and you start to spiral into this negative mindset. So yeah, I love that. So then I guess then the question of curiosity comes up for me is, there's a lot of leaders out there that are struggling with sustainability of the work that they're doing. So then, is the lack of progress or the lack of reaching goals really truly a motivational issue, or is it a sustainability issue, or is it both? Right. And I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
So I think it is both. So I have a simple equation. High performance is in function of trust multiplied against engagement. But I can even take it one more time. High performance is also a function of technical skills times behavioral capacity. So I'm going to stick with the second one. So we often go back and retrain technical ability to get something done when we fall short, but we rarely address the behavior of why we are falling short. And that's really where the solution lies. And that's, again, we know that development of people needs to be on a continuous basis. So what do? Well, we send people to webinars and conferences, and we have them do online modules. Well, you know what happens on Monday morning after? 95% of the stuff has been forgotten.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to learn that human beings, especially adults, learn 20 minutes at a time. And they need to take an action that needs to be measured, needs to be accountable in order to drive real change. And until we realize that is the way to go, that's the secret sauce, we're going to continue to fall short.
Yeah, we used to do this, coming back a little bit to what we were talking about in terms of action plans. We used to come up with action plans specifically to deal with to address the issues that came up during a lesson learned process, whether it be through an actual event or an exercise, for that purpose, to maintain accountability and forward momentum so we can keep taking steps forward. So I love applying that to the individual, the person. From your perspective, what are some of those key trust building behaviors that are often overlooked?
Well, I think it is the most basic one, and that is a key responsibility of a leader, is what I call love the people that you lead. We really need to make more genuine connections with the people that we lead. That does not mean you need to go to their bar mitzvahs or their weddings or have barbecues on Friday afternoon after work. But you do need to get to know the people that you lead. You need to understand their true intrinsic values. Every single one of us is a little bit different. If we get to understand what is important to you, and I can cater to that. Now, I recommend all my clients to read the book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Kaplan. And in there, he explains that each one of us has a language that is innate to us. It's something that we want and we need. Well, in business, that's the same thing. It is your role as the leader to truly understand what the needs are of each person that you lead and cater to that, because that's how you unlock the best. Yeah. Now, in this conversation, you can always see that you have a person with high potential and maybe not performing yet, or somebody who's high performing but has no potential. You might be able to unlock that through meaningful conversations. So loving the people that you lead is the key, the differential, but that takes time, effort, and you need to prioritize that. And you can't just say, I'm very busy, because that doesn't work.
The use of the love languages is a really important. That book is excellent. Another book that's great too is The Leadership Challenge, because Kouzes and Poser talk a lot about having an encouraging the heart, really connecting with humans at a human level, not just from a business ops perspective. So yeah. How does one know if they're the actual bottleneck in the growth of an organization or even in their own career? How do they know that they're the bottleneck?
That is a great question. So another exercise that we need to do with our team members. So we tend tend to manage from what we know and what we think we are. But when was the last time that you actually went out and asked people how they perceive you?
Right.
Because the reality of leadership is not you leading you, it's really leading the perception of you. Now, you can change the perception of you through meaningful actions, making connections, building partnerships, etc. But first, you need to come to realization of that. So I always encourage the people to go ask people above you, to the side to you, below you, at least 10 to 15 of them, and ask them three very simple questions. What are my supernatural strengths? What am I really good at? And then it is about, what are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? And then what should I do more of? Now, through the combination, it is something that we can really learn a lot about ourselves. Now, I also tell them, do the exercise yourself first. Seal it into an envelope, put it in your desk, and don't look at it again until after you have collected the information. Now, sadly, our human behavior is, if I see something coming back from Tammy, and I'm going to look at it, and Tammy tells me A and B and tells me that I have a blind spot, I get all excited about it. I want to make all kinds of changes.
Right.
And that's what we need to learn as leaders, to resist. We need to make sure first that we see this 2, 3, 4 times, and then we can take meaningful action on it. And if you don't quite understand what people say, you need to ask clarifying questions. Now, once we know what our supernatural strength is, we can leverage that. Once we know our blind spot, we can learn to mitigate it. And that's where the bottleneck comes in. If you're not aware of that, how can you mitigate that? Right? And that's why people need to become courageous by speaking up and saying to your boss, you smell, or you too much, or you, and for myself as a leader of a large teams, I spoke often in large groups. When I get excited, I speak fast. Well, my Dutch accent can get into the way. The faster you speak, the less articulate you are. So what I did after I became aware of that, not because I was so smart, but because somebody actually had the courage to tell me, I plunged somebody into the audience, and all they would do is, in my peripheral vision, rub their head as a signal to me that I needed to slow my cadence. Right?
Love that.
And that is what we need to, that's how you become aware of potential bottlenecks and how to mitigate those.
Yeah. And not being courageous enough to make decisions based on anxiety can also be a bottleneck. So, but no, thank you so much for that, and I love the fact that you had somebody lined up to kind of call you out on your behavior at the time. I love that concept because it's a bit of establishing an accountability partner within the office, somebody who can kind of, for lack of better words, call you on your shit. That's kind of the phrase I would use, right? And keep you kind of aligned with where you want to be rather than where you are. It's awesome. One of the things that we deal with, or that I deal with quite a bit in my business, is the notion of burning out. And as we know in the high exec tables, burnout is not necessarily the crash and burn that everybody thinks it looks like. It's a lot of it shows up as high level efficiency and effectiveness, working those long hours, really producing, and we get promoted for this, right? But so what that leads to is this behind the scenes sort of, burning out that happens in leadership. So how do we then help that balancing act? And I'm wondering, I would love your take on this, is how do we push for growth in our careers, but without breaking, or without our clients breaking themselves in the process?
It's a really good question. And again, 60% in healthcare are people at or near burnout. And if I go back and ask the question, how many hours do you work?
Yeah.
And it was great pride. I work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And so, listen, that means that you are highly ineffective.
Yeah, they're a badge of honor.
It's like a badge of honor. If you work, at what level do you work? I'm working at 110%. Well, first, that's not possible, right? There's only 100% to give. That's all you can do. Well, the secret sauce is this, right? All of us should be working at or about 80 to 85% capacity every day in and day out. And then we can flex that up to 100% on an as-needed basis, but it's certainly not sustainable over a long period of time. So one thing that I do is with folks is I do an exercise I call dial to the right. And what that means is that first thing we're going to write down everything that you do in that 60 or 70 hours per week. And I want you to be pretty detailed about that. And then we're going to look at that. Is this value adding or non-value adding? And if it is non-value adding and it's not a regulatory requirement, then get rid of it.
Yeah.
Right? And I have a good story about this if you're interested in it. Then I need you to ask the question, do I need to do it? So the problem is that a lot of high-performing doers become leaders. But by the consequence of that is because they didn't receive the right guidance, they continue to do. So the 20, 30 hours a week for those people working 70 hours a week, or people working 40 hours a week, 8 hours per week, they are doing things that they should not be doing. So they have never learned the art of delegation. And so I dive into that, and I guarantee that I can save people 8 to 16 hours work hours per week just on that. So I'll tell you a little story because I think that will stick with people. So being Dutch, right? Actually, it was an American scientist a researcher, went to Holland, and he worked in the University of Utrecht. and sent off the country. And he would go to he ride his bicycle to work, and he go to the front desk, and he on there said that anybody rides a bicycle has to sign in the logbook at the front desk. She would go there every day, and listen, Holland, everybody rides a bicycle, so there was always a line at the front desk to sign the book. So finally, after a couple of weeks of doing, I said, "Why am I doing this?" He says, "I don't know. I was told that you have to sign your name. It's been a long-standing." He says, what do you do with the books? He said, well, there's a closet in the hallway. So you mind if I take a look? I said, sure, no problem. So he actually took his time, went to the closet when it started, the first logbook. And that was the middle of World War II. And the rule was placed that anybody who would ride their bicycle to work and registered would get a fuel credit to heat for furnishing, during the wintertime. But once the war was over and once there was enough wood and enough oil to burn, nobody did away with the rule that people kept doing. And I bet you that everybody if you go to work and you do that exercise, you can find something that we are doing, that we have been doing for a long time, that adds no value. Start there. And when people do this, it is amazing what they find.
Yeah, the old adage of it's just the way we do things around here doesn't fly at all. I love that. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, because that totally signifies how you can always find some efficiency, some story that can be rectified within an organization. Absolutely.
Without a doubt. Yep.
Yeah. And delegation, my gosh, that is such an important thing, especially for those that are listening that are sort of just went from that operational to strategic role. Is that operational, the lower level executives often are what they call the operational executive, right? The one that's still doing some work. But I'm with you on this. I think that with burnout, we need to learn to let go of the things that we do and start to be the leaders that we need to be in our organization. So that's a really fantastic point that you're bringing to the table. Another question, just to build on that I often will ask my clients, and it's one that they often find powerful, is if your calendar could talk to you, what would it beg you to stop doing? Because that's just one area of all of this. But what would it beg you to stop doing?
A very simple one. Stop booking meetings back to back to back to back.
100%.
So a very simple strategy I say to is that most meetings have at least 30 minutes of fluff in it. So if I would run a new organization today and I was in charge, I would convince the entire team that you can only start meetings at the top of the hour and it should only last 30 minutes. Now, if it goes 40 minutes, so be it, but at least it doesn't go, because if I say it's an hour-long meeting, for some reason or another, we always are there for an hour. The second part of that is, when you are a contributor to a meeting, not a critical member of the committee, you go there to report and leave. Why are you wasting 20 more minutes to listen to things that have no impact on you? But that takes courage to get up out of a meeting and walk out. But leadership needs to come into that. There's no different than the leadership needs to set an environment where people need to feel comfortable to not do, but to delegate. Now, but the risk of delegation is failure. But failure we can learn from, right? Fail first, forward. It is all about, the leader has to set the tone that this is okay. But that, I think, is the greatest opportunity on our calendars. 30-minute meetings, and they only start at the top of the hour.
Yeah, and if you can do the inputting before you go into that call, so that you're actually having a conversation about decision making or moving forward, talking about all the details, I think that's
100%.
Really, 100%.
Data is shared. Yeah, data is shared 48 hours before.
Yeah,
and how many times you go there, people drop data, and the scientists in the room, especially the doctors, they zero into the numbers. They don't hear a word that's being said, and they love finding a minute error and then argue about it for 15 minutes. That's where our hour goes to hell, and we didn't accomplish anything. Right? So send the data 24 hours or 48 hours ahead, and tell everybody, if you don't find the error within 24 hours of the meeting itself, you have no right to say a word. Right?
I know.
And that is...
that resonates so much with me, because I can't tell you how many meetings we would go to and end up in the weeds, and we'd have to say, okay, we're in the weeds now. We have to come back up to, we can do this offline anyway. What do you do for resilience? How do you maintain your own resilience?
So I think I started out by saying this is my mental wellness, my spiritual wellness, my physical wellness, relational wellness, and my financial wellness. Those are my pillars. So I try to work on balancing them every day, and try to be aware when one goes a little bit wobbly, but I don't allow two to become wobbly. And if I see that taking place, I need to do something about it. So that goes back to your introduction. When I feel that way, I go flying, because it's one thing that flying does. You can't think of a single other thing than flying, because you have to focus. You don't focus, you're going to be 6 feet under very quickly, right? So you can let go. of all the other stresses that impact your life. And you go up there, you execute, you have a great, satisfying, and really positive experience, and it helps you reset the pillars and feel that way forward. The key thing is to recognize, right, to learn to listen to your body. Somebody told me a long time ago that we are in a constant juggling act, and we have about 6 balls or 7 balls that we're juggling, but there's only one made out of glass. Everything that we think we can drop at work, because we think, oh, if we drop this, we're going to get fired. All these things are not as important as that glass ball, which is your family, right? The things that are closest to you. Don't drop that one, right? Make sure that you pay close attention to that. And with that is mitigation, right? Is really thinking about that ahead of time. So I just advised a client the other day. He has a great opportunity to go into the consulting world, making big dollars. But I said, so before you accept that role, I want you to have a conversation with your wife. Is your marriage strong enough to go do this job? It will require you to be on the road 60, 70% of the time. Start working on that today, even before you accept that job. And then work on it every day after that to make sure that that glass ball is always protected.
So much power in that message, because I know for me, when I had my second burnout experience, my health and my family were the two things that really struggled. And the amount of clients I have had who are struggling in their marriages because they've given all of their effort to their workplace and to the detriment of their family and their relationships, that lack of balance. I know we talk about balance being a bit of a, not really a thing because it's hard to balance, but the reality is if you don't focus and don't prioritize, it's kind of a non-negotiable way of taking care of yourself is hanging on to those things. And sadly, my experience at least was when I left my role, when I left my 6-figure job to jump into this business, I was replaced within 3 weeks. So that is, I mean, that's a reality check, folks. Like if you're out there thinking, oh, the place would fall apart without me, don't even fool yourself for a minute. They will replace you as they can, right? So you really do have to focus on what's real.
And I want to dive into that for a second. So there's a really interesting clip out there. So I want to ask you, what is one thing that we guaranteed to have in 125 years from now? What's one thing that is most likely sure for everybody?
Guaranteed to have 125 years from now?
Yeah.
Well, that's asking a big question. Are we even going to still be here 125 years
that's
from
the
now?
answer. So we are all dead in 125 years from now.
Yeah.
Except for a couple of turtles and a few other animals, right? But we are all dead. So we all are just share a memory.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe we're lucky because today we're so digital, we're stuck in a computer hard drive, not like we had back in the day. We had pictures on the walls of our great-great-great-parents, right? So that's one thing you have to remember, that be consequential today, right? Make the right decisions for you and focus on that. The other thing is that there's a very interesting clip on YouTube. You just Google it about what happens next, and it talks about that I die, and on the day of my death, everybody cries. But by 2:00 in the afternoon, we are laughing around lunchtime, and by 5:00. People have moved on for life, except for those who are closest. Over the next 2 weeks, people will, come and go, but even that starts to fade away. Oh, by the way, your job is posted within 10 days of your death, and those are the realities. So when you say my job is the most important thing, BS. Think about that. What is most important is what dearest to you, and those are the things you should value and take care of every single day of the week.
Yeah, I think they talk about 2 generations is all it takes to forget who you are.
Oh yeah.
That's all it is. You think about my kids, they know their grandparents, but do they know their great-grandparents?
No,
not really, right? So it's really only 2 generations. So as we start to kind of look at closing out a little bit, getting to the end of this, I want to ask you, if a listener right now is listening to this and they want to lead better, they want to live well, they don't know where to start, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
Look in the mirror and admit to yourself that you cannot do it alone and should not be doing it alone. And that is the most difficult piece of advice that people have a hard time taking for themselves. Now, I will tell you, women are much better at it than men. 80% of my clients are women who recognize and understand that they should not or cannot do it alone, and they seek help and assistance and guidance. Too many guys let pride and ego stand in the way of asking for a little bit of help. Right? They rather invest money in going to play golf than hiring a mentor or spending some time with a great coach. So again, look in the mirror and admit to yourself that you would be much better off if you have an accountability partner, if you have a mentor. Make that investment in yourself and don't wait for your company to do it for you. If the likelihood that is going to happen is not very good. And I can go on a tangent on what companies need to do to be in a better position, be more responsible stewards of leadership, because they come up way short. But don't wait for them. take action yourself. Look in the mirror. You say, I'm not alone. I don't need to do this alone. I need to make an investment in myself. And that's how you often, learn how to dream big and act small.
And then what should they look for in that mentor, that coach that they might need some help from?
So personally, I say look for a mentor, not for a coach. Look for somebody who has been there, done that, and has deep, meaningful experience along the pathway, because they have done these things and learned the hard way. They can share some of the experience. Not that you need to avoid pitfalls, because those are important along your journey as well, but you can have deeper conversation. Look for somebody who makes time for you on a weekly basis, for shorter periods of time than on a monthly or quarterly basis. None of that works.
Yeah.
Right? It is really shorter, meaningful interactions over a sustained period of time that will help you grow. Start with I, and then very carefully go to the we. And yes, leadership is all about the we, but it needs to start with really understanding you as a person. Why do you do what you do? What and how? What is your personal brand? What are your leadership qualities? Where are the gaps? Close those gaps. How, what are those 4 key responsibilities of leadership? Embed that part into your DNA, and all that stuff will be set you on an accelerated pathway going forward.
Final question is, what's one thing that you think leaders need to stop doing immediately?
What should they stop doing?
Stop doing.
I think they should stop pointing fingers at others. People need to take deep personal accountability. There's a very good clip on YouTube too. I use it often in my talks about the Synovus Bank. The guy who says, "Listen, 100 over 0 is all over the bank," and he says, I thought it was I take 100% of your money and give you nothing in return. But what it really means is I take 100% responsibility and accountability for all of my actions, and I make no excuses. Today, too often, we make up nothing else but a bunch of excuses, and we don't take real accountability. Be responsible for your actions, own them, and if you make mistakes, which we all do, and I've made my fair share of those, learn from them and move forward. And once we get that, we will all be better off.
So where can folks find you? What kind of tools, books, what have you got on offer right now that you'd like to invite people to check out?
Sure. You can go to my LinkedIn profile and and join me there. I post every day free nuggets of information. Again, short little tidbits for you to continuously learn to think about. Usually 1 article per week. Go to my website at dutchmentor.com. There's over 200 articles and clips and vlogs and blogs and conversations. Same thing as on my YouTube channel. I encourage you to book a strategy call for 30 minutes, have a conversation about you. I offer a great opportunity for individual membership, it's separate from corporations, to get you started by 30-minute conversations. It's a membership. You start and stop whenever you want. Most people start, they never stop, which is great. But the thing is that take the bull by the horn, take meaningful action for yourself, make that investment. Stop drinking that $7.99 latte at Starbucks in the morning and invest that into yourself. And the outcomes will be a better life, more resilience, a better balance, and all that will lead to the outcomes that you desire, whatever that may be.
Thanks so much for being here, Walter. I really appreciate the conversation. Folks, for anyone who's interested in Walter's information, if any of the content resonated with you, check out the links. It'll be in the show notes. LinkedIn profile, I'll put it in there for you so you can take a look at it. And if you got anything out of this episode today, please make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, do all the things, because it really does help get information, pushes this information out to other leaders just like you who might need this content for themselves. It's absolutely free, and it just gives you some positive vibes. At the end of the day, I just want to wish you all well. Thanks again, Walter, for being here. Until next time, folks, make sure that you stay grounded, stay inspired, and remember to exhale.